I would like to say good morning, everyone, except for some who might be tuning in from other parts of the world. It's been a pleasure being here. I look forward to this. And when I was preparing for my talk, it was basically, eventually I said, why did I have to take the three things all in one talk? Because it was it was very extensive actually. So what I'm going to do is uh, is to go through the first one, the first part, which is on colonialism, and then move on to the more contemporary and present situation in the Philippines, where we are at in our struggle. Before I share my screen, I would also like to say, it brings to mind that at exactly short of one day, uh, May 8th, May 9 of 2018, I was actually together with two colleagues, and Sanghi, I think, would remember this. We were in Jeju at that particular time. Um, Mercy and Pressy, we came to Jeju for a visit. That's a memorable visit, a very good learning experience, which we carry to this day, and we'll continue on to remember that, because it's not only a situation where you learn, but it's also a situation, like in many cases with many of you, I cannot I practically have had experience with many of you uh, along the way in the past, and that has been part of my collection of inspiration and source of strength as we go through this struggle. So let me share a screen before I become more involved with telling you more of the side things. So here I have been tasked to how should I do this slideshow, right? Or well, from the beginning. Okay. I'll just I'll follow this order, but as I said, the first part is going to be very brief, in a sense that it's also it is significant, but it's part of our history, and taking this on as a way of looking at the origins and the reasons for the current state of our situation, which moves from the violent dictatorship and the military bases that has gone into several phases and several periods in the current years. I was telling Kaia a while ago that this year, the Philippines is celebrating, some of us call it commemorating, 500 years of colonialism in the Philippines. That's 1521, when Spain started its period in the Philippines, and then moving on to the period of American colonialism. Of course, a short break of 3 years when Japan occupied the Philippines, and then overlapping this period since 1946, the dictatorship and the fight to get rid of the bases to the present. So that's that seems to be the outline that I am going to follow, and of course, when we look at the revolution against the Spanish rule, we pay tribute to the leaders of the Katipunan. Katipunan is the the group or the system by which Filipino freedom fighters formed themselves to start a revolution against Spain, and starting from very small sector of the archipelago, have spread to many different areas in the Philippines. To me, the legacy of the Spanish period has been the encomienda system, meaning that this system has introduced early on into the Philippines, and a large, which is used as a system of being able to facilitate the imposition of forced labor and the collection of tribute or taxes, and over that period, the system of the encomienda system, which actually basically have started private ownership. I mean, this is not a what do you call this? An original Filipino system of looking at property, because if we listen to our, to the especially the indigenous peoples of the Philippines, they've looked at land not as a privately owned thing, but it is a collective, resource of the people, and it's not even a something that you could kind of apportion to particular individuals or group of individuals, but it is something that is shared and collectively, benefiting from the benefits of the land. So for me, that is very important because the encomienda system has afforded Spain the opportunity to be able to kind of have, particularly even the religious orders and some individuals who became willing pawns and cooperators of the occupation. So moving on from there, what is significant, I could see is the Spanish-American War of 1898 as part of the imperialist expansion. And here, the Spanish-American War and eventually the Philippine-American War have happened. And eventually these, which is, the Philippine-American War have not actually appeared in our history books until quite recently. I think the recent decades when this came into fore, mainly because we are also looking at the reasons for, for the continuing expansion and continuing occupation of the U.S. through its military bases in the Philippines. So that period also is a, we could see then, this is what we'd see in the modern times, of resource, what you call this, resource grab, or what you'd call using its superiority in terms of being able to access raw materials. So the Philippines have become that source, not only of cheap labor, but initially also in terms of the sugar and oil and all of this, which in the early period are very valuable up to this day. The mineral resource and all this lumber and coconut, which are very important resources that people would need to live. And I think that also gave rise to the inroads of U.S. corporations. We see that until today, still ingrained very much. That has practically become part of. Many of us are born with it, like, and eventually realizing that the multinational corporations actually that we have today have originated from that kind of system. And the products of industry, for example, we have not industrialized despite the many attempts, and also the inroads as a token of in exchange for the resources that are taken from the Philippines, is the seeming opportunity and the promise of being able to bring the materials and handicrafts of the Philippines to the United States. So it is a very extractive industry that has been introduced, that has actually become the source of torment and suffering and injustice, especially of many people, especially the indigenous peoples of the land. Okay. Of late, a friend of mine have come up with an article, and I would like to just close this period. As I said, we're celebrating the 500th anniversary of the colonial occupation of the Spanish period. There are different ways of looking at this, but I think I would like to say that I basically agree that we celebrate our resistance, not the empire, which seems to be, when we look around at the celebrations that are being put together, there are times when actually the Spanish and American period have actually been glorified, and as being shown more as a a reason to be grateful for this occupation in the early period. But for us, we celebrate it as a way of looking at the struggle of our ancestors to gain freedom and independence from Spain and from the United States. And I think there is a quote here which is to me a very significant, and I would like to read that quote. In a world of victims and executioners, it is the job of thinking people not to be on the side of the executioner. But I would also say that being a victim speaks well as a way by which we become survivors and we become fighters. So that's the insight that I have out of this. Now, okay, then I move very quickly into the Marcos dictatorship. This is a period of how many? 14 years, actually. I'm sure that many of you have been born around that time, except maybe for Kaia. I don't know if you were already born in 1972. But this is also a period of deep political awakening for many of us. And I'm one of those. I was a student of the late 60s and the early 70s. There is a lot of ferment going on around the world, and the liberation movements were growing, and that includes the Philippines. This is also the period of the birth of the Communist Party of the Philippines and the New People's Army. That's part of our history. And then, like myself, I was a student at that time. And the lessons learned from Vietnam and the inspiration that it brought to many has been a very important lesson that forced us to look into inwardly into the Philippine situation. And if we look at that, we cannot deny the fact that the Philippines has been through the U.S. military bases at that time, particularly Subic and Clark, and including the communication facilities that were used. The U.S. bases in the Philippines figured significantly in the U.S. pursuit during the Vietnam War. So ranging from the storage of Vietnam, of the Agent Orange in the Philippines, the military training exercise. I mean, so this made us realize, that we not only have sent our troops to support the United States, but also that technically the Philippines have become part of this U.S. war in Vietnam. Many of us, I think I would say Mercy, one of my colleagues, even have lived through these times, there is a lot of ferment, mainly led by the students and youth, until the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus in August 21, 1971. And eventually, Marcos declared martial law that started in 1972. A period by which, even if we have anticipated it, is also the implications of it, with so many being illegally arrested without warrant, a lot of desaparecidos and torture victims, plunder and massacre and rape and sexual abuse. I'm not going into the details of this, all the mechanisms of subjugation and torture that the Philippine military have learned from the School of Americas were applied, the different tactics of torture, and also zoning and hamleting of villages during that period. And for me, one of the significant things that happened there is that this martial law period has given rise to a corrupt and abusive armed forces of the Philippines, and the strengthening of the revolutionary force, the armed forces. And by the end of 1986, the transition from a small number of the New People's Army to a period where it reached 22,000 happened. And it ended only through what we'd call, a lot of us Filipinos would call it the people power revolution. Many of us as well in the movement call it as a coup of Enrile and Ramos, precisely aimed at power grab, when there is concern that the communist-led um, struggle or could happen. And this is now known as the People Power Uprising. We don't call it revolution, which happened in February 25, 1986. Okay, let me move on to the period by which the United States have kind of given its full-blown support militarily and economically, giving aid to the Marcos regime, and about 5.5 billion through multilateral institutions such as the World Bank. This has actually brought us into a situation of extreme situation of debt, and that actually did not benefit many the Filipinos, because this money have been siphoned away into some secret Swiss accounts by the Marcos family that today still have not been returned to the Philippines. And to me, the one lasting and deeply damaging impact of the Marcos dictatorship is, as I said, the birth of abusive armed forces, which we still see to this day. They became the apparatus of maintaining the dictatorship. And at the same time, this is also a period by which we have extreme difficulty, because many of our friends are forced to go underground, and therefore, when a period of when it was time for the body of the former dictator was returned to the Philippines, and the family wanted him to be buried in the cemetery for the heroes. So this was a long fight, and one of the justices who was part of the resistance against the Marcos dictatorship, who eventually became a member of the highest court of the land, have admonished us through his message. We forget the lessons of the past when we allow abuse to hold sway over the lives of those who are unrelated to us. But eventually, with the advent of the new government, the Duterte regime, one of the first things that he did in 1986 was to allow the eventual burial of the former dictator into that period. So it was really a feeling of a collective shame, and that really hurt many of those who have suffered, particularly men and women during the Marcos years. So even today, this kind of scar in the lives of many remains, and therefore we continue to resist this kind of the policy of the current dispensation. At no time had it been possible for the Marcos family to be able to return into the limelight and try to, as they say, redeem the name of the Marcos family. I'll now move on into the as a way to introduce the 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 struggle against the U.S. Bases here. And this is a very rough chronology of what happened that brought us, the 1986 period of the EDSA revolution, or what you'd call the coup that eventually led to uh, uh, the possibility of the dictator leaving the Philippines. And I could remember that way back in 1984, um, uh, we have started preparing because around that time we knew already that the RP, the Philippine U.S. Military Bases Agreement, is going to expire in 1991. So this is a period by which we thought we need to prepare for that because it might be a possibility. So to be able to eventually close the bases in the Philippines technically. And so starting in 1985, a campaign for sovereign Philippines and the anti-bases campaign was actually launched officially, although the beginnings of that have been, way back many years. And after the EDSA, after the people power, and a new government came into the as a new period through Corazon Aquino. This gave us the opportunity to have a new constitution. We basically lobbied for this, the freedom from nuclear weapons provision in the constitution, and the prohibition against foreign military troops and facilities in Philippine soil. This basically, the lobby actually included nuclear power plant, but we did not see that through, and we had to give up that part of the lobbying because we stand to lose the opportunity of having these two very important provisions. I think that we will see the significance of these provisions in the Philippine Constitution as we get along and look at the different campaigns. So in 1988, we started a very important strategizing conference, and here speaking tours were held, not only in different parts of Asia, but particularly in the US. And I think that one of the speaking tours of all women, Suzuyo was part of that, and we have somebody from the Philippines who went around the United States informing the American people about the situation in the Philippines, particularly on the situation of the U.S. military bases here. In 1989, short of 2 years, we held the Crossroads International Conference. This is the anti-bases conference, which is also which featured as well a caravan from Subic Clark to the U.S. Embassy. Many friends from the United States, the scholars, researchers, friends who have been part of our resistance against the Marcos dictatorship came to the Philippines and joined us in these strategizing conferences. And 1 year before the expiration of the military bases agreement, we served notice of ejectment of the U.S. bases through its U.S. embassy. And we started a countdown, from to September 16, 1991. I think I would also say that around this period, moving towards September 16, is the eruption of Mount Pinatubo. And I think many Filipinos and even our friends abroad considers this as an important contribution towards eventual closing of the US bases in the Philippines, which I disagree very much because knowing from the inside situation in the Philippine Senate, this actually made it a lot more difficult for the senators to vote against the renewal of the military base agreement, because the Mount Pinatubo eruption have brought extreme economic difficulties, especially to the surrounding areas of the two biggest military base in this part of the world, in Asia and the Pacific. But still, in September 16, 1991, 12 senators have voted to reject the military bases agreement. We needed 8 to reject the military bases agreement, but we are able to muster 12. That's why we call them Magnificent 12, the senators. And immediately after this, the rejection of the military bases agreement, we saw in action how the United States have started, trying to make it possible that they would be able to remain in the bases. And one of these is actually, a request to extend the military base agreement by 10 years. And I think that the senators who voted against the military bases agreement were very quick to respond to that by eventually legislating what we call the Bases Conversion Act, which signals the readiness, even if the government was not ready at the time, to convert the former military bases into civilian and peaceful uses, and that actually, unfortunately, did not stop the U.S. from continuing with its demand for their continued use of the bases, and I think in 1992, November 24, this is very significant for us because we saw the let me skip this part, although it will be good to see this later, maybe, why September 16 is a significant period for us, 1991, mainly because the senators have voted against the renewal of the military bases agreement based on the mandate of the Philippine Constitution, that there should be no nuclear weapons in Philippine territory and there should be no foreign military bases. And so that for us is significant, because if not for that particular provision in the Philippine Constitution, there would be no strong legal basis for the senators to reject the renewal of the military base agreement. So these are some of the photos that came from that. Yes, these are some of the, here, I think it is really good to see this. During the departure ceremony, you could see the US flag being brought down. Sometimes this still, my tears still well up, when I see this, because it even if it's only significant, it symbolizes the eventual final pullout of the United States, technically from the Philippines. So there. So as the U.S. flag is being brought down, you could see the U.S. flag being brought up in Subic. I think this is in Subic, or at that time, November 24. So there was a ceremony, you know, like saying goodbye. Also, you know, people also saying goodbye to the U.S. troops that were leaving the Philippines at the time. Well, I put this, you know, mainly to remind me that there were women at that time who were part of what you'd call the entertainment industry. In a way, these are the American children. There are about 6,000 American children, many of them undocumented, a total of 10,000 left behind by their fathers when and the U.S. And they have remained not to be recognized until today. You know, so this is part of the U.S. legacy. Apart from the toxic contamination that unraveled only after the U.S. bases were turned over to the Philippine authorities, and especially when conversion work started, a discovery of highly contaminated areas in many parts of the former base, both Clark and Subic. When I say you will find me mentioning Clark and Subic because these are the two significant U.S. military base in the Philippines. For the Air Force, it's Clark, which has a total land area of 60,000 hectares. So you can imagine how big that was, because these are training areas for the U.S. before they are being deployed to different wars of aggression, not only in Vietnam, but also, you know, the Korean War, the Iran-Iraq War, and so on and so forth, while the U.S. were there. And about that time, we've also started looking at, you know, stopping the eventual effort of the United States to clinch a new agreement with the Philippines. They call it several names, you know, status of forces agreement, all sorts of names, until they finally settled for visiting forces agreement. This is a well-chosen wording of the agreement because it gives the impression that they are actually just visiting for joint military exercise and also for rest and recreation. A misnomer, I would say. And that gave way to the increasing number of ship visits in the Philippines. We have at least 22 ports around the country. And it is almost like, you know, the U.S. Bases, the Philippines being a big U.S. base where the U.S. forces can actually hold their joint military exercise, and of course the civil military operations, which is meant to win the hearts and minds of people. Okay. Well, these are specific movements that happened. You know, women figures very well in these, trying to stop the U.S. troops. And one very serious development at that time, after the VFA, you know, you have the agreement that that affords the opportunity and the privilege of U.S. troops to come to the Philippines in the guise of joint military exercise and training and rest and recreation. This agreement, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, is actually a completes, what would have been the privilege and the rights that is given to the United States, because essentially this is a basing arrangement that that allows the U.S. To use our existing military facilities, and eventually it also provides for the return of the U.S. Use of the different areas that they used to have, and I would say that even today, the ship repair facilities are there, the naval magazine and everything are all intact. This has not been the firing range or the big facilities that provides for a real ideal military exercise are still existing. These have not been dismantled actually. Well, some of the this particular cavern have been converted into a restaurant. I don't have the photos right now, but there are about I think more than 1,000 of these caverns inside Subic. And some of them have been eventually converted into different facilities, but most of them still exist. Of course, the petroleum, oil, and lubricant, which connects the Subic facility to Clark, is still there. A very important component of that connects the two military facilities. Of course, many of you who are engaged in this, I could see Anne was here, and other friends. You're familiar with the way it is, in facilities like this, the magnitude of its operation, and the importance of facilities like this that enables, the United States to continue with its military operations in other parts of the world. I don't know how much time I have. So this just shows, the different facilities, Filipinos are very fond of cartoon. And one of the artists that come up with this just to kind of stimulate the thinking of many Filipinos. When this is particularly now, or even many years ago, when when China have started its inroads, and building of facilities in the atolls in the South China Sea. That has become a convenient excuse for the Philippine government to allow the use of this facility. Stronger external defense capability is not there, and therefore the excuse of the increasing budget for the military is always in the agenda. And that the trend of increasing the amount of budget that goes into defense and military is continuous. It never has returned, and especially at this period when there is also the drive for counterinsurgency. Okay. just some of the, I'll ask Kaia to share with you this PowerPoint. You can have this so that you can take a look at it eventually when you have when we have the time, just showing you some of the mobilizations. She's one of the lawyers of the transgender woman. Maybe some of you are familiar with that, which won a conviction, yes, and what and eventually have been unconditionally pardoned by the president. A very big blow into, you know, the system that we are trying to uphold. Oh my God, that's me. When I still have a white hair. Okay. These are, you know, oh, this is actually on the day of the signing of the EDCA, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, where we had a mobilization of different organizations that came together to continue to resist and register our objection to this new agreement, where the government went ahead signing the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Okay, I will skip this. I mean, these are just some of the images that you'd see, you know, like the continuing education and mobilization that that we tried to launch over a period of time. One of the strong calls that we'd like to say is never again to U.S. military bases in the Philippines. That is difficult, actually. Technically, we don't have a base, but we have a very strong military presence. We're not, we also have, you know, how to have fun. So part of the things that we do is kite flying and all this. Many of you know Bruce. You know, the reason I'm showing this is that what we do when friends come, especially when they come from the United States or who are engaged, so we ask them to we practically bring them around for a speaking tour. And that is why when Bruce came for a conference, we reserved, I think, 5 or 7 days with him to kind of be able to speak to students and other sectors and other significant movements and alliances that needs to know about the current, at that time, the Obama's U.S. pivot to Asia Pacific. And I would say that, you know, that Biden, who is now the president of the United States, is one of the architects of this U.S. pivot to Asia Pacific and the Indo-Pacific project. So many of us are very concerned about the direction by which the Biden administration will eventually lead to. Okay. This is a very current call, actually, because the China has gained inroads and have started, you know, really coming up with concrete facilities in the South China Sea, and figuring into a possibility of encounter, but we kind of call this a sparring that brings about, you know, the government, particularly in Southeast Asia, to be scrambling for more weapons acquisition. And therefore, that leads into a bigger market for the United States and other arms manufacturer. So, and that is why we often say that, you know, war making is actually big business. It's not just a question of defense and military power, but it is big business. Okay, I think that Kaya, how much time do I have?
It is exactly the ending time here. I guess 2 minutes after, but that's good.
Can you just give me a bit of, just to go through this, um, the sorry, I should share screen, right? So,
Maybe you
where is
can
that?
wrap things up quickly. That would be great.
Yes. Okay, and then okay. As I said in the beginning, like after the Marcos dictatorship, we're back into a another dictatorship, which had adopted a policy of killing. This is not my original slide. It is part of a report, by the Foundation of Media Alternatives, um, which brings me to a point where you have a government that has adopted a policy, kill policies, and the lack of accountability on its part, which brings about a multidimensional impact. I'm speaking about extrajudicial killings, and of course the assault on human rights defenders are there, uh, and uh, and of course, you know, uh, where is that? Okay, slideshow. Oh, sorry. Um, there are at least four anti-human rights agenda of the current dispensation. Uh, the reimposition of death penalty, we're able to stop that. The lowering of minimum age of criminal responsibility, that has also been suspended. The Anti-Terrorism Act, which is now in full force despite the petition of 37. This is uh, groundbreaking. Never happened in the Philippines. 37 interest groups uh, that petitioned the Supreme Court for the abrogation of this agreement. I'm one of the petitioners in one of the petitions, particularly focusing on women, and the continuing effort of the government, not only of this government but the previous government, to change the charter, the Philippine Constitution. Well, they say, including particularly those that pertains to economic provisions, but we don't believe that, because seeing the draft of this agreement, of this plan, there is an effort actually to remove the provision against nuclear weapons and military bases. Um, okay. Um, hmm, there. Maybe you can take a look at this later. Just making it emphasizing the kind of violent governance that the current government have. Uh, okay, its impact on, maybe later you will have a chance to look at this. I'm into the impact of the current COVID pandemic situation. And this is not only true for the Philippines, but in many parts of the world. But particularly for the Philippines, it has been highly dependent on the remittances coming from the overseas Filipino workers. This has very strong economic impact. Okay, these are figures. The Anti-Terrorism Act, actually, for me, is very significant because the military has gained inroads into the campuses and the universities, which is something that, in a way, have not happened during the other years, the other government dispensation. But this particular government had gained inroads into this. It ruled with a lot of, generating a lot of fear among private citizens, and that it is even difficult to kind of speak out oftentimes, Uh, you could, of course, I'll skip that. But I think it is significant also to say the ballooning debts that the Philippines is going into, particularly from the World Bank. And but here I would like to point out, because this is good news for us. The news just came yesterday, and when you look at the Asian Development Bank uh, loan, a decision came out yesterday that the ADB have decided not to fund all projects that concerns fossil fuel projects. So it is a very significant development, uh, a result of many years of lobbying with the Asian Development Bank. I know that this is not, it is significant in a way because it affords us to move forward. When you have an experience like this, it basically inspire people, and it teaches us what can be done in the future in other engagements. So these are glimmers of hope. Okay, glimmers of hope. Let me end with that. Always when when there is what you call suppression, and there's always a way of fighting back. And I could see this, that among the ranks of human rights defenders, uh, there is more consolidation and harmonization of initiatives, which has not which does not happen very often. Oftentimes people work within their silos, but especially during this pandemic, human rights defenders, who are the most affected um, uh, out of these policies that this present dispensation has adopted, are coming together, capacitating, fighting back, initiating boycott of businesses and products that are owned by the Duterte family and its supporters. And of course, the continuing work of the defense of democratic space. This is important, even if at some point, and that includes me, the very tiring work of lobbying Congress and lawmakers. But it is a reality that we deal with, in terms of repealing and rescinding of laws and executive agreements that tends to take away the political, social, and cultural rights of people. And of course, the continuing work of expanding the movement so that we can not only defend the democratic space that we have, but also to narrow, to widen the democratic space that we have at this time. And of course, the resistance to this is there. Okay. And I think this is a closing plate slide of my talk, May 9, 2018. And let me close with that, with our continuing struggle for a nuclear-free, basis-free Philippines. We stand in solidarity with Gambyong and Jeju, solidarity with Hanoko, Takae, Guam, Guahan, and Hawaii, and other communities that resist militarism and war. Our organization, the organizations that I am involved with, particularly, especially the Peace Women Partners, look at the local struggles as very important field of solidarity and resistance. So let me close with that note, and I hope that this brought you a bit of information, and I hope inspiration in the work that you do during these times.